In the ancient soil of Romania, a fear older than the mountains themselves takes hold, a fear far worse than death. It is the dread of what comes after, the terror of the unquiet dead, the neighbor who cannot rest, the family member who returns. This is not a mournful scene filled with tears. Instead, it is one charged with determination. The tools at hand are not for a final burial, but for exhumation, a desperate act that violates the most sacred ground. For these people are not here to honor the dead, they are here to hunt a monster. Yet, this monster is not born of Gothic castles or noble bloodlines. It is far older, far more intimate, and infinitely more terrifying. This is the realm of the Strigoi. In the soil of a timeless land, a terror exists that predates the mountains themselves, an ancient fear that surpasses even death. It is the dread of what follows after life, the unease inspired by the unquiet dead, the restless neighbor, the family member who refuses eternal rest. This is no ordinary moment of mourning. There are no tears here, only a firm determination. The tools at hand are not meant for a burial, but for unearthing, a desperate act of grave violation in the dead of night. These people are not paying respects. They are hunting a monster, a creation birthed by their own fears and beliefs. This is not the refined vampire of novels, nor a creature from distant castles and noble bloodlines. It is something far older, far more intimate, and infinitely more terrifying. Welcome to the realm of the Strigoi. What drives a community to commit such a desperate act? To disturb the dead and perform rituals meant to grant eternal rest, not deny it. To comprehend this, we must journey back to an era before churches and bells, before recorded history, to the primeval forests of the Carpathian Mountains. Here, ancient peoples believed the soul never truly left, that death was but a passage and not a final end. In the ancient soil of this land, a profound belief system once flourished, shaping the community's understanding of life, death, and the world around them. Before the influence of Christianity and the rise of empires, the people who inhabited these primeval forests held an animistic worldview. To them, the forest was not merely a collection of trees. It was a sacred temple, alive with power, mystery, and the presence of spirits. Everything in nature was thought to possess a soul or spirit deserving of both respect and wariness. The rivers, mountains, and great beasts of the forest, the bear, the stag, and particularly the wolf, were seen not simply as creatures, but as potent spiritual forces. Each was a physical manifestation of the untamable wild, embodying the raw, unpredictable energies of the natural world. Human souls, too, were deeply entwined with this world. Death was not seen as a final departure to distant realms or heavens, but as a transformation where the soul lingered, anchored to the land, to the family, and to the memories of its past life. These souls were believed to roam the forest they once knew, visit the homes they once inhabited, and continue to interact with the living. When Christianity later arrived in these Carpathian Mountains, this profound animistic tradition did not vanish. Instead, it retreated into the shadows, merging with new religious ideas to produce a unique and complex cultural fabric. The ancient spirits of the forest were recast as demons, and the age-old fear of restless souls fueled the birth of enduring legends, planting the seeds from which tales of the Strigoi would emerge, forever entwined with Romania's spiritual landscape. Long before the Christian cross cast its shadow over these ancient lands, the people who inhabited the vast Carpathian wilderness lived by a belief deeply intertwined with the mysteries of life and death. Central to their faith was Zalmoxis, a revered prophet or deity whose teaching shaped their understanding of existence beyond the mortal coil. According to the ancient historian Herodotus, these tribes believed that death was not a final end, but a transformation. When a person died, their soul did not vanish into oblivion. Instead, it journeyed to be with Zalmoxis, embodying a form of jubilant immortality. This existence beyond death was far from the silent repose often imagined in later religious contexts. Rather, it was a vivid continuation of life in the presence of their divine figure, a kind of spirited immortality brimming with vitality. The people embraced a ritual every 5 years that symbolized this bridge between worlds. A volunteer messenger was thrown onto sharpened spears, attesting a fate to deliver the community's needs to Zalmoxis. Survival mid disgrace, death meant successful passage, underscoring a deep respect and fear for the unknown beyond. These beliefs did not simply vanish with the spread of Christianity. Instead, they merged subtly into the cultural fabric, sowing the seeds for later legends. The conviction that the dead remain present, connected and perhaps restless, formed the foundation for the haunting myths of the Strigoi. In embracing Zalmoxis' vision of post-mortem existence, the ancient people forged a worldview that viewed death not as an ending, but as a portal, a continuation that, when disrupted, could manifest in terrifying ways. This legacy lingers in the folklore that portrays the Strigoi as unquiet spirits caught between worlds, eternally bound by their refusal or inability to rest. In the Romanian countryside, it was believed that the fine line between the living and the dead could be determined right from birth. Certain signs present at a child's arrival into the world marked them with a fate shadowed by darkness and suspicion. One of the most dreaded omens was being born with the caul. This was actually a rare and harmless fragment of the amniotic sac that covered a newborn's head, like a delicate veil, a biological quirk. Yet, in the folklore of the region, this delicate membrane was seen as something far more sinister, a piece of a shroud from the other world. Its presence was a chilling indication that the child was already partly entwined with death, destined to one day return from the grave as a Strigoi. Newborns with this birthright lived under a veil of fear. The moments just after birth were filled with tension. The midwife's role became vital in performing a careful ritual. The caul had to be removed with great precision, dried, and either destroyed or kept safe as a protective talisman. If this removal wasn't done properly, and the infant swallowed even a fragment, it was believed their dark destiny was sealed. Such a child was doomed to become a Strigoi. From then on, this child's life was shadowed by a mixture of pity and fearful suspicion from the community, watched closely as if carrying a secret curse within. Birth omens extended beyond the caul. The number 7 held terrifying power within this folklore. It was believed that a seventh son born consecutively into a family line bore a second, supernatural soul, often manifesting as an animal spirit. Though this bestowed upon the child exceptional gifts, such as second sight or healing abilities, it came at a dreadful cost. In death, this restless other soul was destined to rise from the grave as a Strigoi, condemned to haunt the living. Like the child born with the caul, the seventh son lived his whole life under a shadow, seen as half in this world and half in the next, a prelude to the unnatural existence that awaited him. Yet, fate was not only shaped by birth signs. The social and spiritual condition of one's birth could also doom a soul. In this devoutly Christian society, baptism was essential for salvation. A child who died unbaptized was thought trapped between worlds, vulnerable and restless, easily claimed by malevolent forces, and doomed to return as a Strigoi. Likewise, children born out of wedlock bore a mark of mortal sin and often faced social ostracization. These children, deemed to live outside God's grace, were natural candidates for suspicion and fear. Thus, whether marked by a supernatural sign like the caul, burdened by the potent number 7, or stained by social and spiritual transgression, certain children were set apart from birth. Their lives unfolded under a cloud of dread, where every action and word was scrutinized, the community ever watchful for signs that darkness festered within. The aura of fear surrounding these individuals was not merely folklore. It was woven deeply into the social fabric, shaping how they lived and were seen by those around them. In Romanian folklore, the concept of the living strigoi introduces a chilling dimension to the terror of the unquiet dead. These are not the reanimated corpses risen from the grave, but rather ordinary individuals believed to harbor dark powers while still among the living. Far from monstrous outsiders, living strigoi could be your neighbor, your family member, or someone quietly residing at the end of the lane. Their feared ability was a form of psychic vampirism, a mysterious and malevolent force through which they could sap the life energy from the world around them without physical contact. It was said they could drain the milk from a neighbor's cow, leaving it barren, wither the crops in a fertile field, and leach vitality from healthy people, causing unexplained weakness and illness. These acts rendered the living strigoi embodiments of misfortune, giving the community a tangible face to blame for the uncontrollable hardships brought by nature or fate. Adding an eerie supernatural power, it was believed that on certain significant nights, such as the Eves of St. Andrew or St. George, the spirit of a living strigoi could detach itself from the body, usually taking the form of an animal. This wandering soul would then venture across great distances to gather with other strigoi spirits at mystical crossroads or remote clearings. There, they engaged in spectral battles wielding makeshift weapons, fights believed to decide the village's fortune for the coming year, whether a bountiful harvest or devastating famine. This belief in living strigoi shaped a world where neighbors lived in mutual vigilance and suspicion. The invisible threat they posed to health, crops, and livestock demanded constant defense, blending ancient folk magic with Christian rituals to protect against their sinister influence. Yet, the living strigoi were not mere legends. They were reflections of the community's anxieties, fears, and attempts to rationalize the misfortunes that so often darken rural life. In the timeless villages of old Romania, the presence of the strigoi was an ever-looming threat, and the community developed a rich arsenal of rituals and protective measures to guard against these unquiet spirits. Central among these was the use of garlic, renowned throughout the world not just as a culinary ingredient, but as a powerful apotrope. Its pungent aroma was believed to repel the strigoi and other malevolent entities. Villagers would braid garlic cloves and hang them above their doors and windows, rub garlic on the window frames, and even apply it to their cattle's horns, infusing their homes and livestock with a barrier of protection. Eating garlic was thought to fortify the body, making it inhospitable to supernatural infiltration and spiritual vampirism. Alongside garlic, the sign of the cross played a paramount role. As Christianity took root in these lands, this sacred symbol became a central shield against evil forces. Homes were blessed, and crosses were etched or hung strategically to ward off the wandering spirits. The smoke of sanctified incense was burned to purify the air, cleansing the environment of malignant influences and creating a spiritual barrier invisible yet potent. The villagers did not stop there. They also relied on nature's gifts and age-old traditions to fortify their defenses. Thorny branches of the wild rose were placed on windowsills, believed to ensnare restless souls attempting to slip inside. Millet seeds were scattered carefully on thresholds. The sheer meticulousness of this task stemmed from the belief that vampires, preoccupied with counting each grain, would be delayed and thus prevented from entering homes until dawn brought safety. These rituals intensified during the ominous night of St. Andrew, regarded as the Night of the Wolves, a time when the boundary between the living and the dead was thought to be at its most fragile. Villages would enact a collective vigil. Garlic anointed every door, window, and chimney, while all pots and utensils were turned upside down to prevent spirits from hiding in them. The entire community united in fear and ritual, facing down the nightly menace with steadfast resolve. While these methods were largely defensive against the living Strigoi, the ones who still walked amongst the living with malevolent powers, the rituals also embodied a deep cultural understanding. They represented a communal effort to confront the unseen forces threatening their survival. A blend of ancient folk magic and adapted Christian faith, held together by the collective will to protect kin and kinship from an unrelenting darkness. In the ancient Romanian countryside, death carried a profound weight, not only as an end but as a determinant of one's fate in the afterlife. The manner in which a person died was believed to seal their destiny, distinguishing the revered from the feared. A good death was one embraced quietly, passing away in the comfort of one's bed, surrounded by family, and having received the sacred rites of the church. Such a departure ensured the soul's peaceful journey beyond this life. However, a bad death was far more sinister, marking the individual with a dark curse that could tether their spirit to the mortal realm. The most dreaded of these was death by suicide, seen as a rejection of God's gift of life. To die by one's own hand was to leave the soul in torment, denied a sacred resting place within consecrated ground. Instead, these souls were often buried at crossroads outside the village, their grace shunned and their spirits feared to linger as malevolent entities. Violent or unnatural deaths were equally feared. Murder victims, torn from life prematurely, were thought to return to seek vengeance. Travelers who died far from home without proper burial rites risked becoming wandering spirits, lost and unsettled. Moreover, those who died under the dark curse of witches or living Strigoi were believed to be infected, destined to rise and perpetuate the cycle of evil. There was also the haunting terror of deaths fueled by passion and unresolved bitterness. A soul burdened with deep grudges, ripped by betrayal or injustice, could not find peace. It was believed such a spirit would cling to its corpse, reanimating it to exact a terrible revenge on those who wronged them in life. In this way, death was never truly final, but a beginning of new horrors. For 40 days after death, the departing soul was believed to linger, traversing familiar haunts before the final judgment. This liminal period was fraught with danger, for troubled spirits could become lost between worlds, threatening the living. The family and community were charged with rituals and vigilant watchfulness, designed to aid the soul's passage and guard against its return. Thus, death in folklore was not merely an end, but a threshold, the crossing of which could plunge families and entire villages into lasting fear. The horrors attached to death were as much about the living as the dead, capturing the dread of losing loved ones and the terror of their possible return, not as cherished memories, but as restless shadows haunting the night. Within the traditions of Eastern Europe, burial was steeped in careful customs, reflecting a deep-seated anxiety about death and what follows. It was believed that the soul lingered for 40 days after death, wandering familiar places before its final judgment. This period was charged with both reverence and fear, reverence for the sacred passage of the soul, and fear that a troubled spirit might become trapped between worlds. During this critical time, the living maintained vigilant watch over the deceased's body. Mirrors in the home were covered deliberately, so the soul wouldn't see its own reflection and become ensnared in the mortal world. Timepieces were sometimes stopped, symbolically halting time for the dead. Every ritual was meticulously performed to guide the soul on its journey and safeguard the living from any unwelcome return. The burial rites themselves exhibited a form of sacred paranoia. Yet there was even the slightest suspicion that the deceased could become a Strigoi. Special precautions were taken. For example, a coin or stone might be placed in the mouth to prevent the corpse from biting its shroud, a chilling sign attributed to vampirism. Sometimes, bodies were buried face down, an act intended to thwart any attempt by the restless dead to dig their way back to the surface. For the most feared cases, more drastic measures were employed. A nail driven through the skull or a sickle, the agricultural tool symbolizing life's harvest, placed around the neck. These gruesome acts were performed as a final safeguard, ensuring that if the corpse did rise, its head would be severed from its body, severing the bond between spirit and flesh. These rituals represented the community's desperate hope to keep the departed at peace, to preserve the natural order, and to prevent the terrifying notion of the dead returning to plague the living. Burial customs were thus not mere ceremonies but vital, protective acts woven tightly into the fabric of life and death itself. In the heart of Romanian folklore, the transformation into a Strigoi is a chilling process rooted deeply in the failure of a departed soul to find peace. When a person dies unsettled, whether due to the manner of their death, unresolved grudges, or spiritual neglect, their spirit can become restless, refusing to leave the world of the living behind. This unrest seals their tragic fate, evolving their presence from that of a mere memory into a malevolent entity bound to return from beyond the grave. Unlike the peaceful passing that leaves the soul to rest, a bad death, marked by violence, suicide, or festering resentment, disturbs the natural order. The body left behind, instead of succumbing to decay, remains unnaturally preserved, sometimes plumper and more lifelike than at the moment of death. These physical abnormalities are seen as undeniable signs that the deceased has transformed into a Strigoi, sustained by a dark force that feeds on the vitality of the living. This revenant does not roam aimlessly. Instead, it is driven by an all-consuming instinct to revisit the places and people once known. Most tragically, its first hauntings target its own family, the wife, children, or siblings sleeping in the home it once called its own. The Strigoi creeps silently through the smallest openings, the keyhole, the chimney, or cracks in the wall, bringing with it an oppressive presence. Victims feel a weight upon their chest, paralyzing and suffocating sensations, or an icy touch that leaves unexplained bruises. Upon waking, they find themselves drained of strength, pale, and cold. The Strigoi's malevolence expands beyond the household, casting a shadow of blight over the entire community. It is believed to spread sickness like a dark plague, decimating livestock, withering crops, and inciting fear among villagers who see no natural cause for such calamity. In this way, the restless and unforgiving spirit embodies not only the violation of death's sanctity, but also the collective anxieties that grip the community. Thus, the transformation into a Strigoi is not merely the awakening of a corpse, but the birth of a cursed being, born from unsettled death, spiritual unrest, and the binding ties of familial strife, an unholy return that threatens both kin and community alike. In the stillness of the night, the Strigoi makes its dreadful return, not with force, but as a silent shadow that seeps into the very homes it once filled with life. It chooses its first victims carefully, those closest to it, the family it left behind. No creaks or broken locks announce its presence. Instead, it glides through the narrowest cracks, slipping through keyholes or chimneys unnoticed, a spectral intruder in the sacred space of the living. Once inside, the presence is felt as a heavy weight pressing down on the chest, a paralysis that steals breath and sows terror. Some feel an icy touch that leaves faint bruises. Others awaken gasping, overwhelmed by an inexplicable chill, and exhaustion that drains their vitality. This is no ordinary haunting. It is a life force bleeding away, a slow but sure consumption of the living by the insatiable spirit of a loved one return as a monster. This malevolent haunting does not confine itself to a single home. It radiates outwards, spreading sickness and despair through the village like a shadowy plague. People grow weak without reason. Their livestock fail to thrive. Milk dries up, and crops wither under an unseen blight. In the absence of understanding germ theory or any cause for such widespread misfortune, the villagers look not to nature, but to the supernatural, suspecting the Strigoi's influence. They believe its varied presence brings disease, misfortune, and ruin, transforming a shared life into a shared nightmare. Within the family, the torment is most personal and heartrending. Nightmares plague the kin, dreams filled with a distorted visage of the one now lost, appearing not as a peaceful memory but as a vengeful specter. The haunted suffer from overwhelming terror, waking drenched in cold sweat, hearts pounding with a dread that gnaws at their sanity. Physically, the family members grow pale, weak, and consumed as if their life essence is being stolen away by the intangible grasp of their undead relative. Caught between love and fear, the family lives in a torturous limbo. They recognize the horror within their midst but hesitate to confront it, torn by grief and the haunting truth that the monster is someone they once cherished. This silence allows the malevolence to deepen, turning what began as a private sorrow into an undeniable crisis for the whole community. As whispers spread and suspicion turns to certainty, the village becomes gripped by a growing dread. The unseen affliction must be faced, for the Strigoi's haunting threatens not only one family's survival, but the well-being of the entire village, demanding action against the unquiet dead that stalks both the living and the restless night. In the heart of the village, where suspicion and fear intertwine, the detection of a Strigoi was a matter of grave importance. The community, deeply acquainted with the sign to supernatural unrest, knew that identifying the unquiet dead required more than mere observation. It demanded the help of nature's own purest spirits. The method was solemn and steeped in ritual. A horse, selected for its immaculate purity, either jet black or pure white without a single speck of another color, was chosen as the instrument of truth. This animal, believed to possess a sacred sensitivity to evil, became the village's guide through the eerie landscape of the graveyard. Guided by a young boy, often a virgin to ensure innocence, the horse was slowly led among the graves of the recently departed. The villagers followed in hushed silence, their lanterns flickering shadows on the ancient stones and sunken earth. As the procession moved forward, the horse's every movement was observed with intense scrutiny. Over most graves, the animal stepped lightly, indifferent to the resting souls beneath. But when the horse approached the grave of the true Strigoi, its instincts betrayed the presence of unholy corruption. It would refuse to advance, digging its hooves deep into the earth. Sometimes it reared, eyes wide with an unseen terror, halting the procession with an undeniable signal. This reaction was considered irrefutable proof. The pure creature had sensed the presence of the undead, and the marked grave was now known. What had been a whisper of fear within the community was brought into sharp, terrifying focus. With the Strigoi's resting place identified by the silent testimony of the horse, the village prepared to confront the horror. The detection ritual did more than uncover a grave. It galvanized a community to face the monster that walked among them in death, bridging the delicate border between the living and the unquiet dead. Under the cover of darkness, a grave was opened, a forbidden act fraught with deep dread and solemn purpose. The village men, their hearts heavy with both terror and resolve, would begin the grim task of digging into the earth with shovels, their efforts marked only by the scrape against stone and a steady rhythm of breathing. Eventually, they would strike the coffin's wood, hauling it out to reveal what lay within, a moment charged with a haunting finality. The village gathered, the air thick with anticipation and fear, as the elder or bravest would pry the coffin lid loose. Within, they sought unmistakable signs confirming their darkest suspicions. In a time devoid of modern embalming, a corpse long buried should have decayed, yet the body of the suspected Strigoi was startlingly preserved. It might even appear fuller, more fleshly than in life, its limbs supple rather than rigid with rigor mortis, and its face showing a ruddy complexion instead of pale waxiness. To the watchers, this was no blessing but a curse, a sign the dead had not truly left, sustained instead by some malevolent force feeding upon the living. Further evidence included wide-open eyes staring from the coffin, nails and hair seeming to grow since burial, and chillingly fresh blood at the mouth or dripping within the coffin. Sometimes, the burial shroud was found gnawed from the inside, the proof that this unholy being had begun consuming even its own resting clothes in hunger before feasting on its family. These grim revelations left no doubt. The figure before them was no longer human, but a monstrous parasitic entity animated by a ravenous spirit. Faced with such certainty, the village prepared to enact the final rite. The community would perform a second, definitive killing, the ritual destruction aimed at not only the body, but the soul itself. A stake crafted from specific sacred woods such as ash, hawthorn, or wild rose was driven through the creature's heart, pinning it to the earth and aiming to sever the bond between spirit and body. Often, this was followed by decapitation, usually with the sharp edge of a spade, to ensure the soul could never rejoin its vessel. The severed head might be buried away from the body or placed beneath its feet to prevent reunification. Additional fearful precautions included stuffing garlic cloves into the corpse's mouth to silence its curses, and turning the body face down to frustrate any effort to claw back to the surface. The final destruction came through fire. The heart, considered the seat of unnatural life, was extracted and burned to fine black ash at a crossroads at midnight, a symbolic purification and ultimate severance from the monster's dark power. But the ritual did not end there. The ash was collected and mixed with clean water, often drawn from the village well, to create a potent healing draught. This was administered to those suffering from the mysterious wasting sickness, night terrors, and decline caused by the Strigoi's influence. Within the logic of folk magic, ingesting the essence of the destroyed creature broke the curse and restored stolen vitality. Through this harrowing sequence, the exhumation, the inspection, the staking, decapitation, burning, and healing, the village sought to restore the natural order, confronting the terrifying return of one of their own as an unquiet revenant. Though the monster was destroyed, its story and the emotions it embodied echoed on, a testament to the ancient fears and pain woven deep into their shared culture. The community gathered, burdened with a grave resolve, prepared for the ultimate confrontation with the Strigoi. This solemn moment marked the final killing, a ritual not simply of destruction, but of complete annihilation of the malevolent spirit bound to the corporeal shell. The villagers sought the heart of the monster, driving a stake with deliberate care and precision through its chest. The wood was no ordinary branch. It was selected from sacred trees, ash, hawthorn, or wild rose, each believed to wield power against the undead. This stake served to pin the creature firmly to the earth, barring any hope of rising again, while simultaneously releasing the trapped, vengeful spirit. However, staking alone was insufficient. To ensure the severance of spirit and body was absolute, the villagers would decapitate the corpse, commonly with a shovel's edge, detaching the head to prevent reanimation. The head was then typically placed between the feet or buried far away, cutting all ties. Additional measures accompanied these acts. Cloves of garlic stuffed into the mouth acted as a ward to silence curses or calls for aid from the other world. The body was sometimes turned face down within the grave so that if any semblance of life returned, the creature would only burrow further underground, away from the living world. The final, most purifying act was fire. The heart, regarded as the locus of unnatural life, was removed and carried to a crossroads at midnight. There, it was burned to fine black ash until only remnants remained, erasing the last vestiges of the creature's unholy existence. But the ritual was not complete until this ash was gathered and mixed with fresh water from the village well, forming a potent cure. Administered to the afflicted family members, this draught was believed to break the vampire's curse and restore the stolen life force. With the monster's body secured, its heart destroyed, and its victims healed through this sacred ash, the unnatural cycle was broken. The community had faced down the Strigoi, banishing the darkness that plagued them. Though the monster was physically gone, its haunting legacy and the roots of its creation would echo long in the memory of the village. Beyond the chilling tales of the Strigoi, as mere supernatural beings lies a deeper truth. They embody the profound anxieties and collective grief of the communities that birthed these legends. These restless entities are not only the undead, but also symbolic reflections of human suffering and societal fears. The symptoms attributed to a victim of the Strigoi, gradual wasting, pallor, persistent cough, and an inexplicable loss of vitality, resemble those of tuberculosis, a devastating and contagious disease that plagued Europe for centuries. In a time before modern medicine, such unexplained afflictions were perceived as malevolent forces draining life from families, casting a supernatural explanation over tragic realities. Moreover, the Strigoi myth served as an emotional outlet for unresolved familial conflicts. The monster's hauntings often centered on close kin because family ties are the most intimate and fraught with complex emotions: resentment, guilt, betrayal. A father who died bearing grudges, a sibling cheated in inheritance disputes, or a wife wronged in life could become the source of this haunting. Through ritualistic destruction of the Strigoi, families symbolically severed toxic bonds and purified themselves from painful memories. This act was not merely about exorcising a monster, but acted as a catharsis and release from social trauma. Thus, the Strigoi legend represents a communal coping mechanism, a dark mirror through which societies confronted the terrors of disease, loss, and the complexities of grief. It allowed people to distill the painful, chaotic realities of life into a tangible enemy that could be challenged and defeated, providing a semblance of control amidst suffering. In essence, the true monster haunting these villages was less a creature of the grave and more the embodiment of human fear, sorrow, and the desperate search for understanding in an unforgiving world. The Strigoi is a haunting symbol not just of death, but of the lingering afflictions of the human heart. In today's world, the legend of the Strigoi has evolved far beyond its terrifying origins. While the literal belief in the undead rising from their graves has waned in modern Romania, the Strigoi remain deeply woven into the cultural fabric of the region. No longer a source of genuine fear, this ancient tale has become a treasured folk narrative, passed down through generations as a vital piece of heritage. The echoes of the Strigoi live on in rural customs and seasonal traditions. For example, on St. Andrew's Eve, many still hang garlic around their homes, not only as a nod to the old protective rites, but also as a symbolic gesture linking past and present. These rituals, once powerful wards against malevolent spirits, now serve as charming reminders of the rich folklore that shaped the community's identity. Moreover, the figure of the Strigoi has transcended its local boundaries, entering the global imagination largely through its association with the myth of Dracula. This transformation has turned the once horrifying creature into an icon of tourism and cultural pride for Romania. The Strigoi, as a folkloric symbol, helps connect the country's ancient spiritual beliefs to its vibrant modern culture. In essence, while the actual terror inspired by the Strigoi may have faded, their story endures as a testament to the power of tradition. It reflects how fear can be transformed into identity, how old legends can find new life, and how a community's past continues to shape its present. The Strigoi legend remains a dark yet cherished mirror reflecting the resilience and richness of the Romanian spirit. The tale of the Strigoi goes beyond a mere vampire myth. It unveils the intricate layers of human fear, the weight of grief, and the cultural stories that define communities. It stands as a haunting testament to our fragile existence and the profound depths of the shared human experience. If you found this journey into the legend of the Strigoi captivating and want to delve deeper into the world of folklore and mysterious tales, please consider subscribing to our channel. Like this video if it resonated with you, and share your thoughts or experiences with similar stories in the comments below. Your engagement helps keep these fascinating stories alive and thriving.